we're going to start, I'll start up here, and then I guess I'll go sit down. All right, Marina, are you ready? Hello. Hello? Duco, can you hear me? Okay. Hi. Thank you for joining today for this side event. My name is Tom Dillon. I'm from the Pew Charitable Trusts, and you are here for making it meaningful. This is an event being put on by Blue Nature Alliance, and Blue Nature Alliance is a partnership of Conservation International, the Minderoo Foundation, Rob and Melanie Walton Foundation, the Pew Charitable Trusts, and the Global Environment Facility. So 5 institutions that came together 2 years ago and with a goal of conserving 18 million square kilometers of ocean, which is 5% of the ocean. And the partnership is currently working in 24 geographies. It has dozens and dozens of partners, local and global partners around the world. I see it very much as a big tent partnership where we have our arms outreached, embracing people who would like to work with Blue Nature Alliance. The reason why it was created was the thought that to get to 30 by 30 in the ocean, there's going to need to be more collaboration, there's going to need to be more innovation, there's going to be a need for more funding. And so the partnership came together to help make that happen. Today, we are here to speak with some of the partners of Blue Nature Alliance, and it's about a topic that I think is really important to this conference, sustainable finance. But sustainable finance, and how can that be done in a way that is most equitable for communities? And so we don't just want finance, although we need a lot more to get to 30 by 30. We need it all, and we all recognize this, to be done in a way that really works for communities and that is durable. So that is what these wonderful panelists are here to speak about. And I'm going to ask them to each introduce themselves and give 2 to 3 minute high-level thought on this topic. After that, we're going to have questions and answers. So please, Marie-May, would you kick us off?
Hello. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Tom, and it's such a pleasure for me to join everyone this afternoon in this panel. So like Tom has indicated, my name is Marie-May Jérémy, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust in Seychelles, as is in the name. Conservation biologist by training, but have been working extensively with ocean governance, policy, ocean policy, and more broadly biodiversity conservation over the past decade or so. But more so now with the work that we're doing with the SECAT Trust. We are Conservation Finance Trust, and we were set up in the Seychelles back in 2015 as a public-private trust to help drive the Seychelles commitments towards protection of its 30% of its EEZ. And we are focused towards delivering on 3 core areas, being biodiversity conservation, climate change resilience, and also the development of a sustainable blue economy in the Seychelles. So over the past couple of years, this is where we've been working, occupying the space of bringing resources on the local level to Seychelles to do marine conservation, climate change resilience, and also trialing out blue economy innovatives in the Seychelles. And I'm sure I'll get a little bit more chance to speak to some of those initiatives during the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-May. And next, we'll turn to Yaba Batista from the Global Fund for Coral Reefs.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jaba. I'm the deputy head of the UN Global Team for the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. Truly a pleasure to be here with you. I think today's topic, it's quite important because for me, by definition, we cannot have sustainable financing without being inclusive and equitable. So that would be my opening line on this today. And in the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, this is truly part of our DNA since we were designed and created and now are working on implementing our programs. We base our work on 4 main principles that are the principles that guide our work in terms of preserving the most resilient reefs around the world. We work on protecting those most resilient reefs. We work on transforming what we call negative reef activities and turn them into reef positive activities. And to do this, and this transformation process requires to be inclusive and equitable. I'll be able, I guess, to talk a little bit more about that. We work also on restoring reefs where this restoration work can further enhance the ecosystem resilience and also the resilience of the people, and where technology can also help us do this better. And the 4th pillar of our work is based on helping communities recover from shocks like climate change and the COVID pandemic. And again, during the talk today, I'll be happy to talk about the details on how we do that and how we work on equitable reef positive solutions.
Thank you, Jaba. Next, we'll turn to Coro Pasisi, who's the president of Tofia Newe.
Thank you. That was perfect pronunciation, by the way. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Blue Nature Alliance, and all of your team members for the invitation today. So my name is Coral Pasisi, and as my name would reflect, I was born in the ocean. I've lived my whole life in the ocean, and I'm still in the ocean, except for the pleasure of coming to the slightly chilly but very beautiful country. So as Tom mentioned, I have many hats. All islanders do. There's so few people that you have to be everything from the driver to the policy analyst to the person who cleans up at the end of the day. So in that context, I run a small non-profit organization in Niue. It's really about trying to ensure that our ocean is sustainably used, conserved into the future to support the next generations, just as we have benefited from that. And growing up in a small country, the ocean is our bank. It provided our food, our education, everything. So we have to make sure that our next generation is cloaked with that same privilege, and that we appreciate that that value you can't put money on, but you need to put money into now because of the state of the environment to ensure that that is sustainable for the next generations to come. And so for me, sustainable financing is always got the caveat of what is it that we are trying to sustain. And for me, it's the true value of protected ocean, which has so many different dimensions of value beyond just carbon, beyond just economic development, and trying to ensure that we fully appreciate those value sets so that we come with the commensurate investment to make sure that we sustain that and grow that for the future of our children. So it's a real privilege to come and learn from the esteemed colleagues that are here and share some of our experiences, and hopefully that will help others be inspired as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Coral. And Diego Flores from the government of Chile, please.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you to the Pew Charitable Trust and Conservation International, not only for this invitation for this panel, but also for the trust deposited in Chile to link and work together with Blue Nature Alliance. It's very important for us as well. For the effective implementation of large marine protected areas. I'm a forest engineer. Do you know what it's doing here? A forest engineer. I have a lot of work with marine biologists. We have in Chile we have a vision of integrated management of marine and terrestrial protected area, not only in Patagonia but also in Pacific Island as Rapa Nui, we're next to you, and Archipelago Juan Fernandez, etc. I have a master's in nature conservation in public administration at Columbia University. I have the head of Protected Areas Department since 2014, and I have in charge of the coordination of the national protected areas processes and the creation of big marine protected areas in Chile. One step is to create the areas. A second step and a permanent steps are how to deal with the management, and it's very necessary to collaborate private public sector in terms of the funding to do that. So that is because I'm here, and thank you very much again.
Thank you, Diego. So as you can see, we have 4 panelists with really, I think, complementary but also different perspectives. National perspective, a perspective that has many different aspects but also is grounded in one particular geography. A global initiative that Yaba is the deputy director of, and then a leading local NGO in the Seychelles. So I think we'll see this discussion about sustainable financing and equitable conservation from a number of different facets. But I'd like first, Coral, to start with you. And we know that you're involved in looking at a very innovative way of financing through ocean credits. Can you tell us all a little bit about what that is?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. So maybe just before I talk to the ocean credits, I think I just want to mention that Tofia Niue, the non-profit organization, works in partnership through a public-private partnership with the government to ensure that our full ocean space is sustainably managed and protected. So that's the underpinning of any sustainable financing effort. And so I want to commend the government of Niue because they've locked up 40% of our entire ocean space. It's 127,000 square kilometers. And to a small country, that's a very big asset that they've locked up as a principle for future payback in the environment. They've also protected 100% of the EEZ under a full marine spatial plan as well. And it's those underpinnings that bring greater value to the ocean, which we have broken down across the area of no-take to assess what does it cost then a small island state to maintain effectively the compliance strategy set up to make sure that that conservation is robust that we don't just have it on paper and in law, but that we actually are surveying it. We're making sure that people adhere to the laws in that place. So the cost of doing that is quite significant. And because conservation has such a long payback period, it's not valuable if you only do it for 1 year. Our government is actually committed to a 20-year period of lockup. So that's going to cost a significant capacity and resources for the country. In addition to that, there are a range of new challenges that we face as small island states in building resilience to the impacts of climate change. Our ocean is deteriorating in its ability to produce food and all of the things that underpin our country and our culture. And so we have to reinvest to bring that back up to a healthy state and to grow that into the future. And then we have to build a blue economy that is reinforcing of ocean conservation so that this is supported by the private sector and the public of our country. And so making sure that our own people, our children, are raised and educated in the blue economy space and they're taught to run businesses in a sustainable way, that's part of the investment required for this holistic package of support. So we've essentially taken all of those costs into account when we developed an ocean conservation credit. It's the cost to maintain that legitimate area in protection, as well as build the resilience and the blue economy to reinforce that protection into the future. So those costs for the Moana Mahu area, which is the 40% of Niue, is what we have costed an ocean conservation credit to. Per square kilometre, that works out as $12.50 per year. And because we are locking it up for 20 years, we are forward selling those units by a 20-year time frame. So that's 250 New Zealand dollars or around 160 US dollars per ocean conservation credit. And because we have 127,000 square kilometres, if we sell those at $250 per credit, we can raise $32 million to capitalize a trust up front. The revenue from that, which would be around $1.5 million a year, that's not a lot of money, but it's enough for Niue to ensure that we can employ a full-time compliance officer. We can ensure that we educate scholarships for our children so they can become specialists in ocean conservation and in the blue economy. And we can build resilience funding to ensure that if you're a small business investing in, say, a dive company, that you will have insurance protection, because the number of increased cyclones that we get means that it's such a high-risk investment for the private sector to invest in a boat to take game fishing or diving. So we have to have some coverage to bring that risk down for the private sector to expand. Then ultimately we can build an economy where we don't have more tourists coming in that will exceed our carrying capacity as a small island, but we will be able to charge more for a high-end environmental product. And our businesses are local, so that money stays in the economy. We don't have big investment coming from overseas and taking that money out. So it really is a holistic approach to costing and then trying to ensure that we all share in that cost. You can contribute as an individual. $160 for one credit is not too expensive. As a promise in return, you get 20 years of sponsorship of a legitimate ocean protection that is supporting the resilience and sustainable economy for a small island state.
That is beautiful, Coral. And I think we can see by the applause that there's a lot of enthusiasm for this idea. And in fact, if you show success, it's the kind of thing that could really be a paradigm shifter. So thank you. Yaba, could you tell us from your perspective, what role sustainable finance can play in supporting and ensuring equitable conservation? And what are some of the lessons that you're learning in your global initiative?
Thank you, Tom. Well, first, I'm super impressed with the work that you are doing, Coral and your organization and the government of Niue. Soon, we hopefully hope to to be working in your part of the world, and we should work together. Let me just say that. Because the Global Fund for Coral Reefs is actually looking at supporting these kinds of initiatives that Coral was describing. I think for us, some of the key lessons that we have in the GFCR and the challenges that we are trying to address is that for us to ensure that sustainable finance is equitable and that the impacts that we hope to achieve are also equitable, we need to make sure that we know what we are measuring. And that's why one of the key areas of work of the Global Fund for Coral Reefs is really developing a strong monitoring and evaluation framework as a global coalition that brings the public side, private sector partners, but also the partners in the water that are like Coral and Mary May. Because if we don't know how to measure, then we cannot really know if our impact is being equitable. So for me, I think that's one of the key lessons that in my current experience, but also previous experience, I've seen and faced. I think this process also needs to be systematic. We need to do it in a very deliberate way. And I think along with that, when I've seen sustainable finance initiatives being developed in the past, and hopefully this is changing, we think about inclusion and equitability often as an afterthought. And this cannot continue to happen. It has to be part of the design process. It has to be, again, deliberate. We have to do it with intention. And that's why, in our case, in the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, for example, we have a series of 10 principles, and one of them is actually to have equitable outcomes, where we ensure, for example, that there is gender equality in the solutions that we bring forward. We are establishing this monitoring and evaluation system that is going to measure all of this, but also in a disaggregated way, so that we can actually see how that impact is being distributed among the different kinds of communities, but also gender, youth, and all of that. So yeah, those are some of the key challenges and lessons that we have so far.
Thank you for those thoughts, Yaba. Marie May, I'd like to turn to you and ask, I know that there's a lot of innovation occurring in the Seychelles, and SECAT is very integral to that. And starting with the Blue Bond that occurred a number of years ago, and the Blue Grants facility that you've established. And can you tell us a bit from your perspective of how each of those is working with equitable conservation?
Okay. So for us, the way we've been set up is really how we have been able to sort of get so much traction, because SECAT was intentionally set up. It was a special purpose vehicle that was established to help the government of Seychelles to actually go through with its debt for nature swap, which was the first of its kind at the time. And by having that underlying sort of factor in its design, it means that we are able to continue to look for innovative financial support that can enter through SECAT to help the government to deliver on some of those broader commitments, especially linked to the implementation of the MSP, which is for the whole EZ and for the 32% of our EZ that is now under marine protection. So the core role of SECAT remains towards the implementation of that. But one thing that is really critical and that has helped us to address the gap in financing marine conservation and climate change resilience program on the ground is our Blue Grants Fund. So currently under our Blue Grants Fund, we receive proceeds from both the debt for nature swap and also from the blue bonds. So annually, we're receiving about $700,000 US that we put into cycles of projects, which we put call for proposals out, and this is open to Seychelles individuals, small NGOs, local communities, even government organizations that are working in that space. So we are able to support directly funding through that. And through the Blue Nature Alliance also, we have a grant with them. And as from next year, we have another $500,000 that is now going to be injected in our Blue Grants Fund to continue to support programs in the space of marine conservation, particularly in marine protection areas. So what this does is therefore we create a pool of resources that allows for people on the ground who on their own might have not been able to get access to such type of resources, and we provide resources up to the amounts of 2 million rupees every year, which we give out to the different local communities and individuals. And since we started, so our first call for proposal was done back in 2018, 17-18, so we are on the 6th call now, and since then we've funded about 56 projects. We have about 38 that is still active because we've had some delays with COVID, but we've disbursed over $3 million that we've given in projects, both for blue bonds and also for the debt for nature swap. And it is in this way that we're ensuring that the people on the ground who are actually doing the conservation work can benefit from the resources that we are attracting from outside. And this is something that remains critical. And I think, Yaba, you spoke about this equitability. We have to, when we're going out there to look for sustainable financing, we have to always remember the target audience. So who in country is going to then use that resource? So therefore, we want to make the link between getting the resources from donors, from partners, and making it accessible to the people on the ground. So finding mechanisms that actually work and ensuring that we deliver on those national priorities, because sometimes that's the difficulty. You might get a lot of external funds, but the accessibility on the ground is not there. And that is something that is part of our core values in leading to ocean stewardship, getting people within the country to take ownership, and we get to be like the vehicle that provides that resource. And that is the approach that the SECAT has used.
Thank you, Marie-May, for that description of what's happening. And lots of people are paying attention to what you're doing in the Seychelles and hoping that there are lessons learned for other countries as well. Which brings me to Chile. And Diego, you know, it's well known that Chile has put a large amount of the EEZ under marine protection, what, 45%, 42% right now, thank you. And, but can you tell us about what ideas that you and your colleagues have for how that can be sustainably financed over time, and how that will relate to equitable conservation?
Okay, thank you, Tom. As you said, our country, through its public authorities, public institutions, local authorities and communities, and with the support of different NGOs, global ones and local ones, have made substantial progress in creating marine protected areas in the middle of the ocean. 42% of the ocean is protected now in jurisdictional waters. The country still faces the challenge of moving from the official designation of these areas, some of them large-scale marine protected areas, such as Rapa Nui, Nazca Desventuradas, Juan Fernandez, and Diego Ramirez in the southernmost part of the country, to the effective implementation, you know, monitoring, linkages with the local communities, governance, enforcement, etc. But studies carried out in the last decade show significant gaps, not only in management effectiveness, but also in the financing. You know, we have estimated in 98% the financial gap of our marine systems. So we have a big financial gap. So we are working in two main ways. In one hand, we are at the final steps of the legislative process in order to approve a bill today in the National Congress to create a new public agency. I will speak in Spanish, el Servicio de Biodiversidad y Áreas Protegidas, the Biodiversity and Protected Areas Agency or Service under the Ministry of Environment. The creation of this new public service will bring fresh public funding from the National Treasury, and it's considered not only resources for maintaining staff and operational resources to the service, but also a public fund where national and local organizations could apply to develop projects to conserve biodiversity throughout the country. That is, in one hand, the public role. On the other hand, along with efforts to increase public fundings for MPAs, not only for MPAs, but terrestrial as well, the country started the exploration and the creation of complementary financial mechanisms that are adequately articulated with the country's conservation policies. In 2018, the Ministry of Environment convened various public and private organizations to form a working group aimed at promoting the creation of a conservation trust fund, which will operate as a financially and legally independent platform to support biodiversity conservation initiatives. This conservation fund, officially established in last year as the Fondo Naturaleza Chile, or Chile Nature Fund, will have several programs designed to address specific national conservation priorities. The first of this program is the Marine Protected Areas Program. The plan for the effective management of Chile's marine protected areas is a 10-year strategic instrument designated to guide investment toward an effective implementation of MPAs. As you can see, we have on the one hand the public resources under this new agency, this new service, and the other hand we have the collaboration with private sector, with donors, with local communities, and the equitable dimension is in both, because we need to work not only with the global efforts, with the big NGOs, but also with the local authorities, local communities. So that's the key in this.
Thank you, Diego. I mean, Chile has been such a leader on ocean conservation, and not only in the country, but also in inspiring many other governments and in international fora. So it's good to hear what you're specifically doing right now in the new trust fund. Coral, when you spoke earlier, you mentioned that you wear a number of different hats, and I know one of them has to do with the Pacific community, the grouping of countries throughout the Pacific. And can you tell us a bit about the discussions there on big ocean conservation, on sustainable financing of it, that you're involved in, and how that relates to this topic if I were trying to bring together that and ensuring equitable conservation?
Thank you very much. So yes, I work, my paid job is for the Pacific Community, which is an intergovernmental organization. It's the largest science and technical organization in the Pacific, and we have 27 member countries and territories. So all of the independent countries of the Pacific and all of the territories across the region and a number of big metropolitan countries. It's 75 years old, and it really reflects an agreement of member countries across the entire Pacific Ocean who want to work together to scale up impact, both for their countries and for the real estate that we're responsible for. So we're one of 9 technical agencies in the region, so I want to speak from that regional architecture perspective, because atop of that sits the leaders of the Pacific who make the decisions on policy and vision, which we all have to get behind and support that vision. And just in saying that, I just realized that the Premier of Niue, the head of government, is in the room. Thank you, Honourable Premier, for coming, and your leadership, which is what makes it possible for a country to actually commit to the type of conservation that Niue has. So I want to pay my respect to our Premier. And also to all the Pacific leaders, because they have set a vision for the Pacific and what we call the 2050 strategy for a blue Pacific continent. That means that we are not small island states. We are a large blue continent. And every part of our EEZ connected to each other forms nearly 30% of the Earth's surface. That's a huge responsibility. And collectively, our leaders have already agreed and supported sustainable ocean management across the entire space. And a huge part of that is ocean conservation. And so the 30 by 2030 is something that is supported by our leaders. So they've set that target this year, that by 2050 we will be the blue Pacific continent. And within that we have big challenges that we need to address and big opportunities in ocean conservation, addressing climate change, and a range of other things. We have now been tasked as the regional agencies of the Pacific to work with countries to develop the implementation plan that will be able to get us from where we are now to the vision that the leaders have set for this blue Pacific continent. A huge part of that is ensuring that we mobilize the necessary resources and become more efficient as a regional architecture to help implement that vision. So this is not always about more money. In fact, it's often not about more money. It's about simplifying the range of different sources into something that small countries can access and deliver well at a rate that's commensurate with their absorptive capacity. It is not helpful to have huge injections of funding in short periods of time. It simply skews our capability into one area for a short period of time, and then all those efforts fold after that 3-year project or that 5-year project. We need to completely change the way we consolidate investments and secure funding so that our country's own national systems can actually deal with that, and our communities can absorb that at a rate that helps them to incrementally build their resilience, incrementally build their ability to have sustainable businesses, and to retain the cultural knowledge and the traditional science and technology that has actually served us well for thousands of years in managing those ocean resources. That's a whole package. So when I'm here and we hear red lines for this part and red lines for that, we can't move one part forward in nature and the people that live within that. We can't move one part forward and leave anything behind. And so we're trying to make sure that we come as a region in a very holistic way, driven very much by the needs of our people and the leadership of our governments, and make everyone else in between who's well-wishing collaborate more effectively. Because for a small country that often has 60 different partners, we have like 5 people in our environment division. I mean, you can't possibly understand those partners and the opportunities, let alone develop projects, report on them, and really effectively draw on those resources. So if we can just consolidate those in things like SACAT and things like the New Ocean-wide Trust, it would be so much better. In fact, I think you could have half of the money available, but just through a mechanism that actually works for the community and the countries in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Coral. Thank you again for the inspirational words about 30% of the planet, the collaboration occurring between Pacific states. And Yaba, I'd like to turn to you again. And, but before I do, just to say, soon after I ask Yaba and Anne-Marie an additional question, I'm going to turn to all of you for questions. So be prepared, Duco and others. But Yaba, can you tell us a little bit about some of the opportunities you see? You have a global perspective with the Global Fund, and so you might see some trends and patterns that maybe the rest of us aren't. And could you tell us a little bit about what you are seeing in this space of sustainable finance and equitable conservation?
Thank you, Tom. I think the challenges are the things that bring us to the opportunities, and we all know that grant funding is not going to be enough to address all the needs that we have for ocean conservation, including coral reefs. And that's why in our approach as the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, we work on a blended finance approach, which is actually going to be using grants. We have a grant fund as one of our key instruments that is deployed in a way that helps de-risk and incubate what we call reef-positive business solutions, or help create financial mechanisms that then can be invested, those resources, into MPAs, and of course with the target of conserving the coral reefs. And as we do that, the idea is that by incubating these businesses, we can attract the private sector to help scale up those businesses, and also achieve then what I would call is the triple bottom line: conservation, positive conservation impact in the marine environment, coral reefs particularly in our case, social positive impact, because the people are the stewards, are the ones that depend on that resource, are the ones that are going to really ensure that that resource continues to be there, not only for them, but for the rest of the humanity, providing those services upon which we depend. And third, as a blended finance mechanism approach and having a business perspective, of course, we have to ensure that there is also economic return within this process. And from our perspective, that is a key aspect of the opportunity that we face. And today being Finance Days for biodiversity, this is the approach that we bring to the table, that we think it's part of the deck of cards that we need to use to ensure that there is sustainability in the use of natural resources, particularly in the marine realm. But as we do this, again, we need to ensure the equitable aspects. One of the key, going back to the challenges, one of the key challenges that we have seen is that we need to make all these mechanisms around blended finance and creating reef positive businesses easily accessible to the people. We need to make sure, again, that they are designed with the marine biodiversity lens, with the climate lens, with the gender lens, with the inclusivity lens, all of those lenses at the same time. Because otherwise, it's going to be a piecemeal approach, right? And for me, that's truly the key opportunity that we have at hand, is how to unite those different sources of funding and the types of financial mechanisms that Coral and Mary May have been talking about, particularly conservation trust funds, as a key vehicle to deliver those financial resources. Because the story in Seychelles and in the Pacific Islands is the same as in the Caribbean, where I come from, where absorptive capacity is really the massive issue. I mean, we know what is the need. We just cannot really handle those amounts of money that way. And these kinds of instruments also serve, I like to say they serve like a valve, where they can hold the money, and then that money can be deployed in a way that makes sense for the environment and for the people.
Thank you, Yaba, for that. And I'd like now to turn back to you, Marie-May. And in your work in the Seychelles, there's been a lot of international attention, and I think you have lessons, to tell this group, whether it's international institutions in this audience, of which there are many, or some of the other big ocean states. And what would you like to impart in terms of lessons learned from your experiences that you described earlier?
Okay, the lessons are many, trust me. Being first is it brings a lot of pressure sometimes, because there's all of the lessons. You don't have anywhere where you go to say, okay, how did they go about it? How did they navigate through that? So a lot of it has been trial and error, and the learning curve has been extremely steep over the past couple of years for us. And I think one of the key things that we realized and quite early was the issue of capacity for absorbing the resources, similar to what Coral has just indicated. For instance, in the first couple of cycles, when we started making resources available to the local communities, they could not actually prepare projects or programs in the manner that, would fulfill sort of the requirements that we had. So therefore, very quickly, we had to therefore put in place mechanisms to support each of the call for proposals, working at the level of the local communities, running road shows every time we put it, explaining, unpacking the contents of what it is that we would like to see in terms of programs and how we could support them. So these kinds of things become very relevant when you have those resources that are coming in country. Similarly, the lesson that we've learned as the trust, therefore, is when we go out looking for resources in how we negotiate or how we start those partnerships, those collaborations, not just saying follow the money, but rather designing programs or attracting resources that are able to actually help you deliver. Currently, SECAT, we are the convening agent for GFCR, and we're working on our program Ocean Resolve, and one of the things that we have to do now is go back to the level of the NGOs and the local partners that are going to be involved and make them understand what these blended finance mechanisms actually means. Most of them, they are used to simple grants. You get grants, you run projects. But now to bring this whole aspect of sustainable financing and make them understand that if we're going to give you a grant, we have to be able to find how to sustain those activities in the long run. And this is something that is becoming very topical for us, and we're trying to work very hard with our local partners, and we're trying to address this through incubators, so blue incubators, blue business incubators, and also accompaniment, so that once we bring in the funds, they are able to grow their ideas, grow their businesses with the relevant support, so that we are able to deliver on ocean conservation, on climate change resilience, which is very, very dear and near to our hearts. It's existential, so we have to keep that in mind, and also doing it in a way that allows for us to earn good livelihoods and actually have an economy that grows around our oceans. So these are some of the core lessons that I think we've been able to learn over the years.
Thank you, Marie-May. And now I'd like to turn to the audience. Patricia, Duco, Kathleen, anybody out there, Julio, who wants to ask a question. So this is to engage you, make this a little more interactive. Yes, Patricia, there's a mic for you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Patricia Zurita, BirdLife International, and all of this is fantastic to hear. I have a question about governance. All of you have different sources of money from different types of investors, donors, whether it's a debt swap, public money, private money. And one of the things that complicates that money going into the recipients, in addition to all of the elements of capacity that you have spoken about, is the demands from the sources of the money and the complications of governing that money. I'd like to hear a little bit more from your perspective. What are your lessons? What are the lessons that you've learned in terms of simplifying the governance so then the financing can flow faster and easier to the people who are receiving it?
Thank you, Patricia. Marie-May, can I turn to you for her question?
Yeah, I think that, thank you very much for that question. And it's a big one that we struggle quite a bit, because sometimes each of the different donors or the partners, they each come with their own processes, their processes for monitoring, their accountability, and their reporting, very different sometimes. So what we've been trying to do now in SECAT is to make sure that we build our own monitoring and evaluation and learning program that we can then adapt when we attract new donors and partners. And we've been doing that through the BNA grant that we have now. So we've been trying to build capacity around that. And we've designed our own sort of MEL strategy that cuts across the core values of the trust. And therefore, there are those key issues that we make sure that we are able to report on. And instead of waiting post-negotiation of collaborations, we try to bring these up front. When we are working with new partners, we'll say, well, this is the scheme that we work upon. These are our core indicators. These are the values that we have. how do we then work together? And I think it helps to make the discussion a little bit easier, because before, yes, it was really, really hard to try and be reporting to multiple donors across multiple formats, and these are coming every quarterly, and we have small teams. So all of that we've had to be factoring in, and for many, many years, SECAT was operating with 2 people. So now we've managed to expand up to a team of 10. But again, a very, very key roles that we are now being able to support through some of the new financing that we're bringing in-house. And one of those key roles is around a monitoring and evaluation team in-house.
Thank you, Marie-May. And Yaba?
I wanted to thank you, Patricia, for that question. I wanted to add to what Mary-May said, because that is the perspective from the recipient. But as Mary-May mentioned, we are currently working with SECAT on developing a GFCR program for the Seychelles. But one of the things that we are also doing, and actually we're doing that with partners like BNA and other partners that work with SECAT, is that they actually have a donors group that already coordinates among themselves so that they don't overburden SECAT. So as we develop this program with SECAT, we are actually being invited to join that same group so that we can align all of this reporting that we require and all of these requirements into the same type of system that SECAT has already agreed upon or is agreeing upon with these other partners that include BNA, the GEF, and many others. So we do, as donors, we do need to make it easier for our partners, because otherwise they spend less time on what really matters, right? Which is conserving the ocean in this case, and more time writing reports.
Coral and Diego, would you like to comment on the governance issue? Okay. Coral?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a great question. And in fact, that's exactly why we have developed a public-private trust that is driven and governed by Niueans, and a means to harness resources through an ocean conservation credit that sets one set of benchmarks and indicators based on the value that we can deliver on and that we see is worth investing in. And if you want to invest in that, you're most welcome. But we're not going to be able to contort ourselves to access big demands for different types of reporting and different perspectives of value. So a lot of people say, oh, why don't you just create blue carbon? So carbon is only one value of that ocean space. There are multiple dimensions of value that we've broken down in the way that we appreciate them. And they, by the way, they also fulfill a range of international obligations across climate change, sustainable development, security, biodiversity. So why don't we just take those outcomes and those indicators, lay them out across this Moana Mahu ocean space, cauterize that into small enough pieces that people as individuals can help sponsor, or big corporations if they want to invest in a large part, or a donor, but just harmonize that investment based on the value of that ocean asset in its total. And we will give you one set of reports every year. We will give you a number of impact stories about all the ways that this has affected change for us, the way that it has changed the asset over time, the ocean space. And hopefully that one harmonized report and MRV system is sufficient for all the people who want to invest in it, rather than us having to create 10 different project reporting requirements, because that's just not sustainable. We've had 30 years of that. That's why we're trying to flip this around and drive it from a country perspective on the basis that we can handle. And I hope that donors, investors, and individuals see value in that and change the restrictions that they have, noting that we're still using the same indicators. It's just not in the systems of policy or project development that they have. It's now we're the face of change and the outcomes are expected. Thank you.
Thank you, Coral. Diego?
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Patricia, for the question. The government play a key role because we have the obligation to talk with everybody. Local NGOs, global NGOs, local authorities, communities, etc. Indigenous people as well. And from that role, the very first task is to build trust, I think. based on transparency, on internal rules, procedures, and long-term conservation planning. A key, we are learning a lot with Rapa Nui people present here. We are the Koronui Otewaikaba. It's a local council of the sea. We haven't received any money yet, but we are building trust among parties, among local communities, among local authorities, among global collaboration, among the government itself. So that's the key, I think. Before receive any money, put the rules in place, in practice.
That was a really complimentary and helpful point, Diego. Thank you. And it's great to know Rapa Nui is here with us, our representative. Is there another question out there? Patty.
Hi, thanks everyone. That's really interesting stuff. I work in Australia predominantly with Indigenous communities all around Australia, and I can say that exactly the same issues pertain to the communities that we work with, in fact to our own organisation, which is relatively small. I'm really interested in all the things that you've said have made a lot of sense. The other thing I'm interested in is organisational sustainability, and I mean the people sustainability within those organisations. I would say that in most of the organisations we work with are getting by, but are on the brink of burnout, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous staff. And so, I've often said to people before, sometimes $10,000 of the right kind of money will beat $1 million of the wrong kind of money if you can get it at the right time for the right purpose. But I'm interested in how your organisations sustain the people, because there's a lot of pressure on people to deliver and sustain that delivery over time. How do you retain and sustain people at the back end? Because it's often not the most attractive or easily measurable aspect, because it's more investment in an organisation for the same output.
Thank you, Patty. Who would like to tackle that? Coral, looks like you're animated about this.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Having volunteered for 7 years, yes, very. So that is such a good point, right? So I think we take for granted that in the conservation space, a lot of us do this because we are invested in the outcomes for us and our children and the future generations. But you still have to pay the bills. And it's very hard to maintain a course of development or gains without continuity of the people, which is the most important part of making anything work, right? You can have lots of money, you can have plans to wazoo and laws. If you haven't got people, nothing is going to happen. There's two things I want to say about this. One is, I have to say, the support that Oceans 5 gave us by way of funding at the beginning, being extremely flexible in moving with our capacity, and the support that the government put on the table by way of their staff, and a few of us that volunteer and make enough money through other jobs to continue to support, has really enabled us to stay that journey. And then having partners like the BNA come on board to supplement all of that analytical support that we need. So we've got the ideas, we've got the passion, we know where we want to go, but to get that you need a lot of analytical capacity to do that. And so the partnership that we've had with BNA over the last 2 years has been critical to get us to that point. So now we've done all the hard work, we've set up the structure, the government is hopefully going to launch the trust and the OCCs for sale soon. That is the funding that we hope will be able to come in and actually sustain people for the long term.
Thanks, Coral. Marime, I know you'd like to say something on this question.
Yes, just quickly on the issue of sustainability of the trust itself and the team. So like I mentioned earlier, we were a team of 2 before, and now it's grown. And one of the key things that we've been thinking about strategically is how to make sure that the trust remains relevant and also remains able to continue to deliver on those responsibilities. In our setup, being public-private, we have some arrangements that is built into our Debt for Nature swap that is guaranteeing support and sustainability to the trust for a period of up to 20 years. And that includes the core staff of the trust. So for that, we have that, and we also have a Blue Endowment Fund, which was also included as part of the design, which will be maturing in the next 17 years, and that will continue to support the core staff and the program for a number of years. However, there are some core areas that we find have been incorporated now in our trust that we want to maintain. So it is around this aspect of financial sustainability that we've now incorporated through the work that we're doing in BNA in building that capacity so that we can continue to bring in funds to support all of the other staff. And this is by way of training, by way of designing new programs, new grant, getting accreditations, and bringing in partners like GFCR, whereby we are able to ensure that we can continue to attract or pay 2 or more staff that we can keep with the trust to help us deliver. And it's all included in our business plan, which we've just worked on this year, and which will become live next year. So we've incorporated that in a strategic level as well as in an operational level to ensure that we do not have those sort of capacity drains that happen and that fluctuates in and out as you get projects, which is usually the case. Thank you.
We are going to be ending soon. Could you make it brief?
30
Yaba?
seconds.
Thank you.
I think in my experience, and I'm not talking necessarily about currently in GFCR, but wider, I think we cannot talk about sustainable financing without thinking about the institutional sustainability as well. Those two go in hand. And so I think for me that is key. And I think part of the conversation that needs to happen between these kinds of institutions that receive funding from the GFCR or from other donors is that we need to change our collective perspective in looking at staff cost. I actually don't like that word, cost. This is not a cost. We are investing in the people. And I think we need to see it really as an investment.
That was great. Thank you, Yaba. Diego, was there any last word from you?
Not really. I feel like a blue whale because of the noise. I haven't been able to understand the question. Sorry.
It's okay. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for participating and attending this panel. It was put together by the partnership called Blue Nature Alliance, which I briefly introduced at the beginning. But I wanted to say there are some people out there in the audience who work for Blue Nature Alliance, too, if you'd like to speak with them. Chris, could you raise your hand from Conservation International? And Shubash from Pew. And are any of the others, of course, Stephanie as well. If you'd like to learn more about the Blue Nature Alliance partnership, you can speak with any of the three of them, and also there's some materials here. And even more importantly, I'd like to thank the 4 panelists for sharing their perspectives on this important issue of not only does there need to be more money in this space, it needs to support and underpin equitable conservation. And I think that came out really strongly, Diego, in what you said about in the trust fund and how you are preparing for it through the discussions at multiple levels, and in the wonderful opportunity you have with Ocean Credits Coral that I think everybody is hoping is very successful and will be replicated, therefore, around the world. And in your perspective, Yaba, from your fund and the many experiences you have now around the world and how you're trying to do this in a way that is very sensitive to injecting funds within, but doing it in a way that's effective. And thank you, Marie-May, for what you've told us about Seychelles. I know many of us are following Seychelles very carefully and seeing it as a place for learning lessons from, and you gave us many of those today. So thank you. I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you again for attending.